Russian tanks drove up to confront them. The tanks faced off, engines running 50 yards apart. Tension grew rapidly. Nerves could fail. Someone could open fire. For 3 days, shocked Berliners watched the standoff. A clash seemed unavoidable. What nobody knew was that neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev had ordered this confrontation. Even today, nobody can explain why the American and Russian tanks were sent to Checkpoint Charlie, or who sent them. It's a mystery of the Cold War. The leaders of both countries kept silent during the standoff. Both tried to play down the incident, undertaken without their consent. Russian and American tanks stood facing each other, eyeball to eyeball, rounds in the chamber. The Russians knew the American saying, "He who blinks first loses." But Khrushchev winked. He moved the Russian tanks into side streets where they were unseen. Relieved, the American commanders pulled out. Again, the world had barely escaped a nuclear confrontation. Kennedy later expressed the American view, admitting in private conversation, "The wall is better than the war." But then, 3 days later, shattering news. The Russians had detonated a super bomb.
When I worked in General Headquarters, I heard Soviet generals discussing the scientists, who are the most bloodthirsty beasts. Sometimes they bring such plans to us that we say, "God, it's terrible. It's really inhuman."
The designers of the super bomb gave it a very Russian name, Ivan. It equaled 50 million tons of TNT, or 1 million train boxcars loaded with explosives, 2,500 times the power of the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. The bomber had a special coating to protect it from the heat wave. The enormous bomb had to be fixed to the belly of the plane. It was too big for the bomb bay.
The explosion took place at an altitude of 15,000 feet. It had to be that high. At that altitude, the fireball did not touch the ground. It sucked in less soil, diminished radioactive contamination of the atmosphere.
A 5,400 square foot parachute would delay its fall. The bomber needed time to get away. These cameras were 60 miles from the epicenter. "We were in the devil's jaws," the pilots said. The leg of the mushroom cloud was 6 miles wide. The radioactive fireball reached an altitude of 40 miles above the surface of the Earth.
The explosion was beautiful, if I may say so as a scientist.
The shockwave of the monstrous explosion traveled 1,000 miles. It broke windows in Norway and Finland. These pictures were taken 500 miles from the epicenter. But then the scientists had the most monstrous idea of all. It has been written as fiction, but the plan was all too real.
But there was another, even more terrible savage project, codenamed Doomsday. It was developed as the ultimate measure. If we lose a war, if communism is dying, why should anybody survive? The project was to design a bomb, which if exploded, would cause all life on Earth to be terminated.
This bomb was to be built inside a huge ship. The Ivan bomb, some 30 feet in length, had shocked the entire world. This nuclear device would destroy it. The ship itself would be the bomb. The entire hold would be filled with fissionable material. The structure of the vessel and the water it sailed in would vaporize. It would fill Earth's atmosphere with a radioactive cloud. The ship was to sail along the Soviet borders, its meters constantly monitoring radiation levels. If ever they registered radiation that indicated nuclear apocalypse in the Soviet Union, they would automatically trigger the monstrous bomb. Mankind would be destroyed. But the bomb to end the world would be automatic, out of control. Even a Cold War risk-taker such as Khrushchev could not take that risk. He banned the idea. The doomsday machine was never built. The new year 1962 could have become the last in human history. Doomsday might have come as a consequence of the Cold War, perhaps as its logical conclusion.
1961, maybe into 1962, that little period was the period in which the United States, for the last time, would enjoy such superiority over the Soviet Union in both bombers and missiles and any other kind of delivery systems that it would conceivably be possible, this was the theory, to attack the Soviet Union, destroy Soviet communism forever, and have no damage.
By 1962, the Russians had a problem. The United States had a 17-to-1 superiority in nuclear missiles and warheads. More frightening was the fact that the U.S. missiles were based in Great Britain, Italy, and Turkey. They could reach population centers in the Soviet Union in under 10 minutes. The Soviets had no forward bases. Their missiles had to be launched from Soviet territory and needed 25 minutes to reach U.S. targets. To the Soviets, this disadvantage gave the U.S. the opportunity to launch a first strike. Khrushchev desperately sought a means to balance the nuclear threat.
And I do not believe, and I never have believed, by the way, that the Soviet Union was unequivocally, permanently, unmistakably aggressive. We've never taken, and this is one of the origins of the Cold War problem, as a matter of fact, taken at least regard for Russian legitimate defensive interest.
In 1962, Khrushchev made a dangerous and secret move. For a while, it remained secret. Then on October 14th, 1962, an American U-2 plane on a reconnaissance mission over Cuba took a series of high-resolution exposures. Experts in the CIA laboratories analyzed the photos and came to a highly alarming conclusion. Soviet medium-range missiles had been installed in Cuba, 90 miles from the United States. They were discovered by chance. One day the Soviets forgot to camouflage their sights. The discovery shocked the Americans. On the 22nd of October, President John Kennedy addressed the nation.
Shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace.
At any minute, the developing crisis could turn into a global nuclear war with Cuba as its trigger. The roots of this drama go back to 1959, when Fidel Castro seized power. As a communist, he had reason to worry that the United States would take action against his regime. An alliance with the Russian was his best hope for survival. For Khrushchev, the enemy of his enemy was his friend.
First, Raul Castro, in the summer of '61, goes to Moscow to ask for help. Che Guevara and a bunch of his people go in August to ask for help. It turns out that in April, a trip was made that we didn't know about. We found out recently. Che Guevara goes back and asks, and I've seen the document. The document says, we need help qualitatively different than anything we have received before. He didn't ask for nuclear weapons, but what could he possibly be talking about? Because they've already got tanks and MiGs and soldiers and guns and boats, and so forth.
Khrushchev loved the style of diplomacy that relied on a nuclear bluff. He wrote to Castro, "Now with our missiles we can hit a fly." "It's great," Castro replied, "but how about hitting the U.S.? Perhaps at that moment Khrushchev got the idea. In June 1962, under the cover of large-scale war games, the Russians brought troops, equipment, and arms to Soviet seaports.
Okay.